The neurologist had just left my ICU room when my daughter-in-law whispered to my son, "Cancel his rehab." The longer he stays helpless, the sooner everything becomes ours. My son hesitated, then said, "I'll handle it." They thought the stroke had taken my voice and mind. They were wrong. As soon as the door closed, I looked at the nurse, blinked twice, and slowly spelled, "Call my lawyer." Don't tell my son. I want you to know this story isn't easy, but it matters. Before we dive in, leave me a comment. Have you ever felt unheard when it mattered most? Your voice here has value. A quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. What matters is the message at its heart. The whisper cut through the ICU silence like a scalpel. Don't hire a caregiver. Don't schedule physical therapy. The longer he remains dependent, the easier it is for us to handle everything. I heard every word. My daughter-in-law, Cecily, 39 years old, with a law degree from Duke, and the face of someone who volunteers at charity galas, leaned close to my son Malcolm's ear and delivered my death sentence in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and betrayal. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even blink to signal that I understood. But I heard. God help me, I heard everything. Let me go back. You need to understand what I lost to understand what came next. Monday morning, September 8th, 7:15. I was mowing the backyard of the house I built, overlooking Lake Norman, 3 acres of Carolina grass, that I insisted on maintaining myself despite having the money to hire a grounds crew. My late wife, Rosemary, used to laugh at me for that, said I was the only man in Charlotte with a $40 million aerospace company who still pushed his own mower on Monday mornings. Rosemary died 6 years ago. Cancer took her in 4 months faster than either of us thought possible. The house still held her presence in every corner, the garden she planted, the kitchen, she redesigned the porch, where we'd watched sunsets for 30 years. I kept it exactly as she left it. Some people called that devotion. My daughter Saskia called it healthy grief. Malcolm called it a waste of prime real estate. I had remarried 2 years later, Vivian, a quiet woman from Charlotte, with grown children of her own. She understood the boundaries of a house still haunted by someone else's love and asked for little. That morning, the September sun felt kind on my 68-year-old shoulders. I was thinking about retirement. Malcolm had been vice president of operations at Harrington Aerospace for 8 years. 42 years old, Harvard MBA, married to a corporate attorney, father to my 11-year-old grandson, Graham. I'd built the company from a single contract in 1991 into something that employed real people and supported real families. Malcolm was ready. I was ready. I remember thinking I built something that will outlast me. The world tilted, not gradually, not with warning. One moment I was guiding the mower around Rosemary's rose garden, and the next, the grass was rushing toward my face. The mower tipped. My right side went dead, not numb, dead like someone had erased half my body from existence. The last sound I heard before unconsciousness was the mower engine still running, blades chewing grass 2 feet from my head. How does a life built over 68 years collapse in the time it takes to mow a lawn? I woke Tuesday morning in the ICU at Atrium Health, Charlotte. Woke isn't the right word. Surfaced, became aware. My eyes opened, or I think they did, but nothing else responded. I couldn't turn my head, couldn't lift a finger, couldn't make a sound, but I could hear. Malcolm stood to my right. I recognized his cologne before I managed to focus on his face. $30 an ounce, the same brand he'd worn since business school. He was talking to someone in a white coat. "Your father suffered an ischemic stroke," the doctor said. Dr. Harold Mercer. I learned later a neurologist in his 50s with the calm, measured voice of someone who delivered bad news professionally. The good news is we caught it early. No major brain damage. The paralysis and aphasia are significant, but with aggressive intervention, prognosis for recovery is very good. What kind of intervention? Malcolm asked. His voice carried the same tone he used in board meetings, analytical, unemotional, already calculating. Private nursing care, daily physical therapy, speech therapy, starting within the week. Dr. Mercer said. 4 to 6 months of intensive work. It won't be easy, but I've seen patients with this presentation regain 70 to 80% of function. 4 to 6 months, 70 to 80%. I clung to those numbers like a drowning man clings to driftwood. I'll arrange everything, Malcolm said. Good, Dr. Mercer replied. Time is critical. Every day without therapy makes recovery harder. I'll have my assistant send over recommendations for care facilities and therapists. Footsteps, the door opening, closing. Dr. Mercer left. Silence. Then Cecily moved. I couldn't see her clearly, my eyes wouldn't track properly, but I heard her heels click 3 steps closer to Malcolm. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. We were alone. Stu, don't hire a caregiver, she whispered. Don't schedule physical therapy. The longer he remains dependent, the easier it is for us to handle everything. 7 seconds of silence. Malcolm didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He didn't say anything. And that silence, that specific, deliberate absence of objection, told me everything. My chest screamed. Not from pain, from betrayal. The kind that doesn't come from strangers or enemies, but from the child you raised, the man you built a company, for the son who was supposed to carry your name forward. Cecily's hand appeared in my peripheral vision, resting on Malcolm's forearm. The power of attorney paperwork is already drawn up, she said softly. We just need him incapacitated long enough to make it stick. What if someone notices Malcolm's voice? Quiet, not horrified, not refusing, just cautious. Who? Cecily asked. Saskia. She lives in Asheville and visits twice a year. Your mother's been gone for 6 years. The company trusts you. No one's going to question the devoted son taking care of his father's medical decisions. Another silence. Okay, Malcolm said. 1 word, 2 syllables. My son chose his inheritance over my life in less time than it takes to order coffee. They left. The door closed. Machines beeped around me, monitoring vitals, tracking a body that had become a prison. I tried to move, tried to scream, tried to do anything that would prove I was still here, still conscious, still human. Nothing. A single tear escaped the corner of my right eye, sliding down my temple into the pillow. No one noticed. They thought I couldn't hear. They thought I couldn't understand. Most importantly, they thought I couldn't remember. They were wrong. Their footsteps stopped just outside my door. The gap was maybe 3 inches wide enough for sound to carry, narrow enough for privacy, if you assumed the person inside couldn't hear. The doctor said the first 6 months are critical, Malcolm said. I knew that voice. Knew it as an infant's cry, a teenager's argument, a grown man's boardroom presentation. My son? Standing in a hospital hallway, talking about me like I was already gone. He emphasized it twice. Malcolm continued. Intensive physical therapy starting immediately. Daily sessions. He said if we skip this phase, Dad might never walk again. Schlinty. I couldn't see them. My eyes were fixed on the acoustic ceiling tiles, those horrible white squares with tiny holes that every hospital in America seemed to order in bulk. But I could hear everything. The hum of the vending machine down the hall. The squeak of a nurse's shoes on linoleum. The slight echo that meant they were standing near the wall, close enough to the door that Malcolm could lower his voice and still be heard. And Cecily's voice, flat, waiting. Chikai, and I just want to make sure we're thinking this through, Malcolm said. If the doctor's right and we don't schedule the therapy, He'll be dependent permanently, wheelchair-bound, maybe unable to communicate beyond basic gestures. My chest tightened. Not from the stroke, from something worse. Hope, stupid, desperate hope that my son was about to choose differently. That he'd heard himself speak those words, wheelchair-bound, unable to communicate permanently, and recognized the horror of what he was considering. That some part of the man I'd raised the boy I'd taught to ride a bike and balance a checkbook and treat people with dignity was still in there fighting. All the better, Cecily said. 2 words, 4 syllables. Delivered with the same casual tone someone might use to agree about dinner reservations. The hope died, but something else was born in that moment. Something cold and patient and absolutely committed to survival. Cecily. Malcolm started. Malcolm. Her voice sharpened. You asked me 3 months ago what it would take to move the company sale forward while your father was still interfering with every decision. You asked me last month if there was a legal path to taking control without a prolonged court battle. You asked me 2 weeks ago if anyone had ever successfully argued for emergency power of attorney based on incapacity. 2 weeks ago, before the stroke, the machines around me continued their steady beeping, monitoring a body that had just absorbed a truth worse than paralysis. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. I know, Malcolm said quietly. I know. Then stop second-guessing, Cecily said. The neurologist gave you the perfect cover story. Experimental therapy, non-traditional approaches, family providing care at home, whatever language you want to use when people ask. No one is going to question the devoted son who's arranging private nursing instead of institutional rehab. What if someone does question it? Malcolm asked. Saskia, the company board, someone. Your sister visits twice a year and calls on birthdays, Cecily said. The board trusts you because your father trusted you. And right now, your father can't contradict anything you tell them. Footsteps. Closer to the door. I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision, Malcolm's shadow falling across the threshold. He's still my father, Malcolm said. My heart lurched. Not hope this time. Something more fragile. The possibility that 39 years of being a son still meant something against 3 months of planning a betrayal. Silence. 3 seconds. That was the window of time my son had to choose what was right. I counted every one. 1. Malcolm standing in the doorway, shadow stretching across industrial tile. 2. Cecily waiting in the hallway, not pushing, letting him arrive at the decision himself. 3. The hum of the vending machine. The distant ding of an elevator. The steady rhythm of my own heartbeat on the monitor, proof I was still alive to witness this. I'll cancel the schedule, Malcolm said. The shadow withdrew. Footsteps receded down the hallway, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. I lay in the bed, eyes open, body motionless, mind screaming. People talk about betrayal like it's a single moment, a knife in the back, a secret revealed, a dramatic confrontation. But real betrayal is quieter than that. It's a son standing in a hospital doorway with 3 seconds to choose between right and easy, between a father and an inheritance, between the man he was raised to be and the man he decided to become. Malcolm chose, and in those 3 seconds I made up my mind. I would not allow my silence to mean surrender. I didn't know how yet. Didn't know if my body would ever respond to my brain's commands, if I'd regain speech or movement, or any of the basic functions that separated human from vegetable. The neurologist's words echoed 4 to 6 months of intensive therapy, 70 to 80% recovery. Without therapy, those numbers meant nothing, but I had something Malcolm didn't account for. Something Cecily's careful legal planning couldn't predict. I had information. I knew what they'd said when they thought no one was listening. Knew about the 3 months of planning before the stroke. Knew about Cecily's calculation and Malcolm's 3 seconds of almost conscience. Knew that this wasn't grief or stress or a daughter-in-law manipulating a vulnerable son. This was deliberate. The tear from earlier had dried on my temple, leaving a faint track the nurses would wipe away during the next vital check. No evidence, no proof. Just a paralyzed man in a hospital bed who couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything except listen and remember. They thought that made me helpless. They were wrong. Somewhere in this body, in the parts of my brain that still fired correctly, in the consciousness that remained intact, despite the broken pathways between thought and action, I was still Leland Harrington. Still the man who built a company from a single contract to $53 million in revenue. Still the man who'd navigated 3 recessions, 2 hostile takeover attempts, and 1 devastating personal loss when Rosemary died. I'd survived worse than a stroke. I'd survived my own son. The question wasn't whether I had the will. The question was whether I'd have the time. Time became strange when you couldn't move. Wednesday morning arrived. I knew from the shift change, the different voices, the angle of light through the blinds. 36 hours since the stroke. 34 since I'd learned my son planned to let me rot. The question wasn't whether I had time. The question was what I could do with it. The nurse who walked in that morning asked something no one else had thought to ask. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," she said, addressing me directly instead of reading my chart. "I'm Rachel Mitchell. I'll be your nurse today." Rachel Mitchell was 32, blonde hair in a practical ponytail, wearing scrubs with small purple flowers. She moved efficiently, checking the IV adjusting monitors, but then paused at the foot of my bed and looked at me. Not at my chart, not at the machines, at me. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" she asked. 2 words formed in my mind. "Please." Yes. I tried to move, tried to speak, tried anything that would answer her. My right eyelid twitched. Rachel's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, leaning over the bed rail. "Mr. Harrington," she said slowly, "if you can hear me blink twice." I focused every functioning neuron on my right eyelid. Blink. Blink. "Oh my God," Rachel whispered. She glanced toward the door, then back to me. Her hand gripped the bed rail. "Okay," she said quietly. "Let's establish a system. 1 blink for no. 2 blinks for yes. Can you do that? Blink. Blink. Are you in pain right now? Blink. Can you hear everything people say in this room? Blink. Blink. Does anyone else know you're conscious? Blink." Rachel released a breath. In 36 hours of lying in this room, that was the first time anyone had asked for my opinion, asked what I knew, asked anything that treated me like a human being capable of answering. "Mr. Harrington," Rachel said, her voice dropping lower, "I need you to answer honestly. Are you safe?" I thought about Malcolm standing in the doorway. 3 seconds of deliberation before choosing betrayal. The conversation about canceling therapy, ensuring permanent dependence, stealing a company while I lay trapped. "Blink." "No," Rachel said. "You're not safe." She straightened professional mask, sliding back, but her hand trembled as she adjusted my IV. "I won't tell anyone until we know exactly what you want to do. But we need to get you a way to communicate more than yes and no." "I'll be back this afternoon." She left. I lay counting ceiling tiles, wondering if I'd just trusted the right person or made a catastrophic mistake. What I didn't know then was that Rachel had faced a choice the moment she walked out that door. Report my responsiveness to Dr. Mercer immediately, which was protocol or wait, because she'd understood that the first person to be told would be Malcolm. She chose to wait until she knew what I wanted. That decision cost her professionally later, but it saved me. 4 hours later, Rachel returned, carrying something under her arm. "I brought something that might help," she said, glancing at the door before moving to my bedside. A laminated chart, the alphabet in large black letters arranged in a grid. A small laser pointer dangled from a cord. Your right hand still has some movement, Rachel said. Not much, but I watched your fingers twitch this morning. If I put this pointer in your hand and hold the chart where you can see it, can you tap letters? Blink, blink. It's going to be slow, Rachel warned, and exhausting, but it's better than nothing. She positioned the chart on an adjustable tray. The laser pointer felt impossibly heavy when she placed it in my right palm, but my index finger managed to curl around it. Take your time, Rachel said. I'm not going anywhere. The first letter took nearly a minute. My finger trembled, the laser dot wandering before finally settling on C. Rachel wrote it down. Jakuska, she confirmed. Next letter, A. Another minute of struggle. LL. Rachel's pen moved across her notepad, recording each letter without comment. MY. LAWYER. She looked up. Call my lawyer? She read slowly. Blink, blink. I wanted to rest. My hand felt like it weighed 50 pounds. But there was more that needed saying. DONTTELLMY. Rachel stared at the complete sentence. The air in the room changed. She'd asked if I was safe, and I'd answered no, but this was confirmation. The danger wasn't abstract. It was specific. It was family. Call my lawyer. Don't tell my son, Rachel read aloud. Blink, blink. She didn't ask why. Didn't question whether I was confused or paranoid. She simply nodded once, sharp and decisive. What is his name? She asked. My hand was shaking badly, but I managed 3 more letters. PAX. Pax, Rachel asked. I wanted to spell the full name Paxton Reeves, attorney friend, for 28 years. The man who'd handled every contract and legal battle since Harrington Aerospace was just me, and a single government bid. But my hand gave out. The laser pointer slipped from my fingers. Rachel caught it, set it aside, and placed her hand over mine. That's enough, she said gently. You did enough. I'll find him. That sentence, call my lawyer, don't tell my son, had taken 23 minutes to spell. 23 minutes of the most intense physical effort I'd experienced since the stroke. 23 minutes that felt longer than the previous 36 hours combined. But it was also the moment I realized something Malcolm hadn't counted on. Silence does not equal helplessness. I couldn't walk, couldn't speak, couldn't feed myself or control when I slept or prevent my own son from plotting to steal everything I'd built. But I could still think, could still strategize, could still tap out letters one agonizing character at a time until the message was clear. Rachel stood tucking the notepad into her pocket. I'll call him tonight, she said. From my personal phone off hospital property. And Mr. Harrington, whatever's happening here, you're not alone anymore. Rachel kept her promise. Paxton Reeves arrived before dawn, carrying only a leather briefcase, and when he saw my eyes open and tracking his movement, his shoulders relaxed for the first time in 48 hours. Oh, thank God, he said quietly. I was preparing myself to say goodbye. Paxton Reeves, my attorney and friend of 28 years, pulled a chair to my bedside, while Rachel stood guard in the hallway. 54 years old, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around his neck. The same man who'd handled every contract since Harrington Aerospace was just me and a single government bid. Rachel had already explained the alphabet chart system. Paxton held it steady, his face growing darker with each letter I spelled out. CECILYSAIDDONTHIRETHERAPY. 45 minutes. That's how long it took to spell out the complete story, the whispered conversation, in the ICU, Malcolm's 3 seconds of choosing betrayal, the 3 months of planning before the stroke even happened. Paxton's hand shook when I reached that part. I want to file immediately this morning, he said when I finished. Emergency injunction, full investigation, police involvement if necessary. My finger moved to the chart. N-O. Paxton stared at me. No. I-W-A-N-T. Toshehowafar-T-H-E-Y-A-R-E-W-I-L-L-I-N-G-T-O-G-O. Leland Paxton started. My finger tapped one more letter, then another. Letthinkthewon. Paxton set down the chart, looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, understanding settling over his features. You want evidence, he said. Irrefutable documented evidence of conscious intent. Blink, blink. All right, Paxton said. But we need to talk about legal protection. The family trust documents. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick folder I recognized immediately. The irrevocable trust I'd established in 2010, 3 years after Rosemary died. Everything is in here, Paxton said, spreading the pages where I could see them. The Lake Norman estate, 100% of Harrington Aerospace shares, your real estate portfolio, current valuation between $40 and $60 million. You're listed as sole trustee with full control. Malcolm is the beneficiary upon your death, but he has zero access while you're alive. I built that wall back in 2010 after Rosemary passed away. At the time, I thought I was protecting our legacy for my son. I never imagined a day when I'd need to protect it from my son. The problem, Paxton continued, is power of attorney. If Malcolm can convince a court you're incapacitated and get POA authority, he could potentially argue for trustee replacement on medical grounds. It's a loophole, but it exists. My finger found the chart again. H-O-D-L-O-N-G. How long do you have, Paxton translated? Depends on how aggressive they are. POA filings can take weeks if contested days if rubber-stamped. But Leland, every day you wait is a day they could be moving assets, forging documents, building their case. ENEADPROOF. Paxton closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they held the same look I'd seen in boardroom negotiations when he knew I was right, but hated the risk. Okay, he said. But I'm documenting everything. Every conversation, every decision they make without your consent. When you're ready to move, we'll have a paper trail that buries them. Blink, blink. And on Leland, Paxton added quietly. I'm not leaving you alone in this. Rachel has my direct number. You spell one word, help, and I file everything that same hour. He left before Malcolm's morning visit, slipping out through the service entrance like we'd planned. Friday afternoon, an ambulance transported me home. The Lake Norman estate looked exactly as I'd left it 4 days earlier. 3 acres of manicured lawn, the house I'd designed myself in 1998, tall windows reflecting afternoon sun off the lake. Beautiful. Permanent. Mine. They carried me through the front door on a stretcher, past the living room where Rosemary and I had hosted Christmas dinners, past the kitchen where I'd taught Malcolm to make pancakes when he was 8, down the hall to the first-floor guest room that had been transformed in my absence. Hospital bed, IV stand, medicine cabinet, monitoring equipment. A woman waited inside. Dad, this is Denise Ingram, Malcolm said, your private caregiver. Denise Ingram was 40 years old, round-faced, wearing pale blue scrubs. She smiled at me with practiced sympathy, the expression people reserve for those they assume can't understand. We hired the most dedicated private caregiver, Cecily said into her phone voice, carrying from the hallway, where she was updating someone. Probably a relative. Definitely a performance. Round-the-clock care in his own home. So much better than a facility. Malcolm and the paramedics transferred me to the bed. Adjusted pillows, connected monitors, professional, efficient, tender even. Then Malcolm left the room. Cecily entered, closed the door, stood beside Denise. A few guidelines. Cecily said to Denise, her voice dropping to business tone. No walking exercises, no specialists unless I approve them first. If he shows any unusual reactions, tries to communicate, seems more alert than expected, call me immediately. Not Malcolm, me, before anyone else. Denise nodded, taking notes on a small pad. And Denise, Cecily added, this is very important. My father-in-law's condition is delicate. We don't want him overstimulated or stressed with false hope about recovery. Sometimes kindness means accepting limitations. I understand, Denise said softly. Cecily smiled, touched my shoulder gently. We'll take such good care of you, Leland. She left. I lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling of the room I'd built. I knew every corner of this house, every echo, every trick of light. I'd chosen the wood for the floors, the paint for the walls, the angle of every window to catch the lake view. And now I lay inside it like a prisoner serving an unspoken sentence. But prisoners, I had learned in business, always know their cages better than their guards. The house was silent when the memory surfaced. 11 p.m. Friday night, first night back in my own home. Darkness pressed against the windows. Denise had left hours ago, leaving me alone with thoughts I couldn't escape. I knew this room. Built it myself in 1998. Knew the way sound carried from the hallway, the creak of the third floorboard, the angle of moonlight through the east window. My prison, yes, but mine. And in the darkness, memory sharpened. 3 nights before the stroke, Tuesday evening, September 5th, Cecily had arrived at the house carrying a small plastic pill organizer, 7 compartments labeled with days of the week. Your doctor updated your blood pressure medication, she'd said, setting it on my bedside table with that smile too bright, too helpful. I picked up the new prescription. This organizer will make it easier to track your daily dose. I'd thanked her, appreciated the thoughtfulness. She was always doing things like that, organizing, managing, making sure everything ran smoothly. But now, lying in the dark, I remembered something else. Wednesday night, September 6th. I'd woken around 2 a.m. needing water. The bedroom door was cracked open, hallway light creating a thin wedge of illumination. Through half-closed eyes, I'd seen movement at my dresser. Cecily, standing at the medicine cabinet. She held the new pill organizer in one hand. In the other, a small, unmarked container, not the orange pharmacy bottles that usually held my prescriptions. She was transferring pills from her container into the organizer compartments, one by one, careful, methodical. I drifted back to sleep, assuming she was just organizing the medication she'd picked up, breaking them out of some bulk container into daily doses. Thursday night, September 7th. The same thing. 2 a.m. Cecily at the medicine cabinet. Different pills. Same unmarked container. Same careful transfer into the organizer. Friday morning, September 8th, 7:15 a.m. I took the pills from that organizer with my breakfast. By 7:30, I was lying in the grass with a stroke stealing half my body. 3 consecutive days. Then the catastrophic event. Coincidence. In business, I'd learned one thing early. The most expensive coincidences are rarely coincidences. Blood pressure medication properly managed prevents strokes. Blood pressure medication improperly dosed or deliberately altered can cause them. Too much of certain drugs or the wrong combination and blood vessels in the brain don't just fail. They rupture. Had Cecily swapped my medication, replaced my actual prescription with something that would guarantee the stroke they needed to execute their plan? I had no proof. Just a memory of seeing her at the medicine cabinet in the middle of the night, twice transferring pills that didn't come from labeled pharmacy bottles. But the timing, the precision of it, the fact that they'd been planning this for 3 months before the stroke happened. I lay in the darkness processing. If I was right, this wasn't just betrayal. This was attempted murder. Cecily hadn't waited for me to become vulnerable, she'd created the vulnerability. Malcolm hadn't just capitalized on my stroke, he'd known it was coming. No one could see me in the dark. Denise was gone. Malcolm and Cecily were home, probably asleep, congratulating themselves on how smoothly the plan was executing. I moved my right hand. Not much. Just the index finger. A twitch. Then 2 fingers. The movement hurt muscles that hadn't responded properly in a week, neural pathways trying to remember how to fire correctly. But they moved. I rested. Then tried again. Index finger, middle finger. Wrist rotation maybe half an inch. The neurologist had said 4 to 6 months of intensive therapy for recovery. But he'd also said the first weeks were critical, the window when the brain could rewire itself, when damaged pathways could be rebuilt if you worked them constantly. Malcolm and Cecily had denied me that therapy, but they couldn't deny me this. Alone in the dark, where no one could see, no one could report back to Cecily, no one could stop me, I could train myself. Millimeter by millimeter, muscle by muscle, I practiced until my hand cramped, then rested, then practiced again. No one knew. No one could see. But in the dark of the room where they thought I was slowly fading, I was coming back to life, one small movement at a time. Saturday morning, Denise arrived at 8 with a breakfast tray. "Okin." "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," she said with professional cheerfulness. "I brought oatmeal and your medication." She set the tray on the bedside table. Next to the bowl sat the same plastic pill organizer. 7 compartments. Saturday's section opened 2 pills waiting inside. The same box Cecily had brought. The same box I'd watched her fill from unmarked containers in the middle of the night. Potential evidence or useless coincidence? But either way, I needed to preserve it. Rachel had left something for me before I'd been discharged, a small laminated card, with the alphabet pocket-sized, easier to use than the full chart. It sat on my bedside table, partially hidden under a book. I moved my right hand toward it. Slow, clumsy, but visible, Denise noticed. "Do you need something?" I tapped the card. She picked it up, held it where I could see. "You want to spell something?" My finger found the first letter, moved to the second. Each tap took effort, but less than Thursday in the ICU. The practice in the dark was working. Please. Denise wrote on a notepad without comment. K-A-P, P-I-L-L-B-O-X. She stared at the completed message, then at the pill organizer on the tray, then at me. Silence stretched between us. I could see the calculation in her eyes. Cecily had hired her. Cecily paid her. Cecily had given her explicit instructions about what to report. But Denise was also a caregiver. She'd spent 20 years taking care of people. And whatever else she wasn't stupid. She picked up the pill organizer, looked at it for a long moment, then placed it inside the bedside drawer. Not in the trash. Not back on the tray. Hidden. Preserved. "I'll get you different medication," Denise said quietly. "From the main supply in the medicine cabinet. The labeled bottles." She left the room without another word. A small pill box. Could be evidence, could be meaningless. I didn't know which. And this timing, 3 nights of pill swapping. Then a catastrophic stroke was too precise to be accident. I had built an empire by knowing the difference between misfortune and design. This was design. The pill box sat in the drawer for 3 days. Evidence of what I wasn't sure yet. But Denise had hidden it instead of throwing it away, and that small act of defiance suggested I wasn't as alone as Cecily thought. Then I fell. 2 a.m. week 2, September 16th. I'd been practicing in the dark again, reaching, grasping, trying to train muscles that had forgotten how to respond. The phone sat on the far nightstand, deliberately placed out of reach by Cecily. I knew I couldn't use it even if I reached it. But the act of trying the stretch and strain was exercise. I stretched too far. Gravity won. I hit the floor hard, the sound of my body against hardwood echoing through the quiet house. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Denise burst through the door, still in her nightclothes. She'd been sleeping in the guest room upstairs, per Cecily's instructions for round-the-clock supervision. Mr. Harrington. She dropped to her knees beside me, hands checking for injuries with practiced efficiency. Can you hear me? Are you hurt? I blinked twice. Yes. Where? She asked. I couldn't tell her. Couldn't gesture. My right side had taken the impact, shoulder throbbing, but nothing felt broken. Denise pulled her phone from her pocket. Dialed. This is Denise, she said, when someone answered. Mr. Harrington fell out of bed. He's on the floor, conscious, breathing, but I don't know if... Cecily's voice cut through the phone speaker loud enough for me to hear. Is he bleeding? No, but... broken bones visible. I don't think so, but he needs to be examined. Then put him back in bed. Cecily said, her voice flat and cold as winter steel. Don't call 911 as long as he's still breathing. Falls happen. It's part of the condition. Just get him comfortable and monitor him through the night. Silence. Mrs. Harrington. Denise said slowly. If he's injured internally, he's not, Cecily said. And we don't need emergency room doctors asking questions about his care plan or second-guessing our family decisions. Put him back in bed. Call me in the morning with an update. The line went dead. Denise stared at her phone, then at me. Something in her face changed, a hardening around the eyes, a tightness in her jaw. She said nothing, just slid her arms under my shoulders with unexpected gentleness and lifted me back onto the bed. Her touch was different than before, less clinical, more careful. I'm sorry, she whispered. So quiet I almost missed it. She left the room without another word. The next morning, an old flip phone appeared in my bedside drawer, fully charged. No note, no explanation. I didn't know why she put it there. Maybe conscience, maybe fear, maybe both. But right then, I didn't have the luxury of telling the difference between an ally and someone just covering their own moral debt. I had a phone now. That was what mattered. 3 nights later, September 19th, 11:30 p.m., the side entrance door opened during what I'd later learn was a 45-minute security camera glitch. A man entered carrying a jacket and a small black duffel bag. He was 60, maybe 65, with iron gray hair cut military short and shoulders that had once been broader. He moved with the careful economy of someone whose body had logged a lot of miles but still knew how to work. Yeah, Mr. Harrington, he said quietly, pulling a chair to my bedside. My name is Vincent Hayes. I'm a retired physical therapist from the VA hospital. Paxton Reeves asked me to come see you. Paxton, my attorney. Still working behind the scenes, building the case I'd asked him to wait on. I worked with veterans for 30 years. Vincent continued, his voice low enough not to carry beyond the room. Traumatic brain injuries, spinal damage, strokes. I know what people look like when they refuse to quit. He leaned forward, looking directly into my eyes. And Mr. Harrington, you've got that look. So here's what's going to happen. 3 nights a week, I'm going to come through that side door during very convenient camera malfunctions that a friend of Paxton's has arranged. We're going to work. It's going to hurt. You're going to want to quit. But we're not going to quit. Understood. Blink, blink. Good, Vincent said. Let's start now. Sit up. I stared at him. Sitting up required core strength. I didn't have arm strength that had been stolen by the stroke balance that existed only in memory. I didn't ask if you could, Vincent said calmly. I told you to do it, so do it. 17 minutes. That's how long it took. Vincent guided my right arm into position against the mattress. Told me to push. Nothing happened. Told me to push again. A tremor. Push. My elbow bent slightly. Push. My shoulder lifted an inch off the bed. "Tu de cortine," Vincent commanded. "Engage your core. Remember what that feels like." I didn't remember. My body didn't remember. But I tried anyway, millimeter by millimeter, muscle by muscle. My right side doing most of the work, my left side barely contributing. Vincent's hands spotted me ready to catch if I fell, but not helping. Not doing the work for me. 17 minutes of the most intense physical effort I'd experienced since the stroke. And then for exactly 4 seconds I was sitting upright. 4 heartbeats. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then my strength gave out, and I collapsed forward into Vincent's waiting arms. He lowered me back to the pillow with the same careful control he'd demanded from me. 4 seconds, Vincent said. "Tomorrow we aim for 5. He packed his duffel bag, checked the hallway, slipped out through the side door into the night. I lay in the bed, every muscle screaming sweat, cooling on my forehead. 4 seconds. That was my entire victory for the day. To anyone else it was nothing. To me it was everything, because those 4 seconds proved one thing Cecily didn't know, yet I was coming back. Not in the 4 to 6 months the neurologist had promised with proper therapy. Slower than that. Harder than that. But coming back nonetheless, 1 second at a time. 4 seconds became 5, then 6, then 8. Vincent came 3 nights a week through the side door, and each session pushed me closer to something that resembled function. But progress I was learning moved slower than conspiracy. Paxton opened his laptop on Monday morning and showed me what my son had done in the 48 hours I lay unconscious. "Malcolm canceled the rehabilitation center 2 days after you were admitted," Paxton said, turning the screen so I could see the email. "September 10th. You were still in the ICU. Dr. Mercer hadn't even finalized your discharge plan yet." The email was short, professional, regretful. "Due to unforeseen family circumstances and alternative care arrangements, we need to cancel the reservation for Leland Harrington at Carolina Rehabilitation Center. Thank you for your understanding." Signed, Malcolm Harrington, VP of Operations, acting on behalf of family. He also canceled the private nursing service the hospital recommended. Paxton continued scrolling to another document. "Same day. Changed your discharge destination from the rehab facility to home care with minimal medical supervision." I stared at the screen. The timeline was damning. Dr. Mercer had told Malcolm the first 6 months were critical. Malcolm had acknowledged that skipping therapy meant I might never walk again. And within 48 hours of me being unconscious before I could object or consent or even understand what was happening, he'd dismantled every avenue for my recovery. "There's more," Paxton said quietly. "The conservatorship petition." He pulled up another file. Legal documents dense with language I recognized from years of contracts and negotiations. "Et go home. Filed September 11th, Paxton said. 3 days after your stroke. It requests emergency conservatorship on the grounds that you lack the cognitive capacity to manage your own affairs or make medical decisions." "Who signed the medical assessment?" I spelled out on the alphabet card. Paxton's jaw tightened. "Dr. Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher, my family doctor for 15 years. The man who handled my annual physicals, renewed my blood pressure prescriptions, signed insurance forms. Not Dr. Harold Mercer, the neurologist who'd actually examined me in the ICU. Not any specialist with expertise in stroke recovery. An old acquaintance who clearly hadn't examined me recently enough to know the truth. The assessment describes you as permanently lacking cognitive capacity due to severe neurological impairment," Paxton read. "It recommends immediate transfer of all financial and medical decision-making authority to your son as nearest adult relative, permanently, That word sat in my chest like a stone. So Malcolm hired a law firm I've never heard of, Paxton added. Not your usual corporate attorneys. A boutique firm that specializes in probate and conservatorship cases. They filed everything within 72 hours of your stroke. My son did all of that in the 48 hours I lay unconscious in the ICU. These were not the actions of a panicked man making desperate decisions in a crisis. They were the actions of someone who had prepared, someone who knew exactly what steps to take the moment the opportunity arrived, someone who'd been waiting. I've contested the conservatorship petition, Paxton said. Filed objections, requested independent medical evaluation, demanded a hearing. But Leland, the court moves slowly, and Malcolm is moving fast. How fast am I spelled? Paxton closed the laptop. Looked at me with the expression I'd seen in boardrooms when he was about to deliver news that would change everything. I hired a private investigator, he said, to find out why Malcolm is so desperate to control your assets right now. The report came back yesterday. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, set it on the bed where I could see. Malcolm owes nearly $1.8 million, Paxton said. Failed real estate investment in 2021. He co-signed loans for a business partner who defaulted. Took out hard money loans to cover the losses from the first investment. Then embezzled from Harrington Aerospace to pay the interest on those loans. $1.8 million. I built Harrington Aerospace from a single government contract into something that outlasted every recession, every hostile bid, every setback I'd ever faced. Survived 3 recessions and 2 hostile takeover attempts. And my son had stolen from it to cover gambling debts dressed up as investments. The company's Q4 audit is scheduled for early November. Paxton continued. 6 weeks from now, standard annual review. If you're managing the company when that audit happens, the discrepancies will be discovered immediately. Malcolm will face embezzlement charges, prison time, complete financial ruin. 6 weeks. Suddenly, the timeline made perfect sense. Malcolm didn't just want my inheritance. He needed me incapacitated before the audit deadline, needed conservatorship to take control of the company delay or manipulate the audit, hide the evidence of what he'd stolen. The stroke hadn't just been convenient timing, it had been necessary timing. I spelled slowly. Was the stroke caused? I don't know, Paxton said. But I sent the pill box Denise gave me to a private lab for analysis. We'll know in 2 weeks what was actually in those pills Cecily was swapping. 2 weeks. 6 weeks until the audit. Every timeline in my life had suddenly compressed into a race between my recovery and my son's desperation. Can you walk yet? Paxton asked. I spelled working on sitting. How long until you can stand? Don't know. Paxton nodded slowly. Then we have a problem. Because Malcolm is filing motions to accelerate the conservatorship hearing. He wants a ruling before you have time to demonstrate capacity. And Leland, if he gets that conservatorship before you can show the court you're recovering, he controls everything. The company, the trust, your medical care, all of it. I once told Malcolm when he was 22 and facing his first business setback, money can be lost and made back, but character lost is gone forever. He didn't remember, or he chose to trade it away. Either way, I thought lying in the bed with new understanding settling over me like weight, this is precisely why I cannot afford to fail. The audit was 6 weeks away. Malcolm's conservatorship hearing would likely happen before that. I had maybe 4 weeks, maybe less, to come back from the dead. 6 weeks to go from sitting upright for 8 seconds to walking into a courtroom and proving I was still the man who built an empire. 6 weeks to save everything. 6 weeks to save everything. The timeline compressed around me like a vice conservatorship hearing company audit my own body's slow crawl back toward function. But what the investigator discovered on Thursday changed the entire calculation. Malcolm wasn't the mastermind, Cecily was. Paxton arrived September 25th with a supplemental report, the kind that comes when investigators dig past the obvious and find the uglier truth beneath. Cecily discovered the embezzlement months before Malcolm confessed, Paxton said, opening the folder. April based on the private investigator's timeline. She didn't tell you, didn't demand Malcolm repay it. She held on to the evidence, held on to it, like ammunition, like leverage. Why, all thing I spelled on the card. Because she's smarter than your son, Paxton said bluntly. Malcolm panicked when you started showing signs of recovery in the ICU, called Cecily from the hospital hallway. The investigator pulled phone records and matched them to witness statements. He read from the report. Cecily told Malcolm, if your father recovers, we both lose everything. You lose the company, and I will tell everyone you did it all alone. I lay in the bed processing that. I'd thought Malcolm was the architect, and Cecily the willing accomplice. A son gone wrong, a wife who enabled him. But this inverted everything. Cecily hadn't been dragged into conspiracy. She'd engineered it, discovered Malcolm's crime, weaponized it, waited for the exact moment to strike. And when Malcolm hesitated in that hospital hallway, those 3 seconds I'd counted, she'd backed him into a corner with a threat dressed as partnership. She's not just greedy, Paxton said quietly. She's calculating, and that makes her far more dangerous than your son. 2 days later, September 27th, Paxton returned with lab results. The pills Denise saved from the organizer, he said, setting a printed report on the bed. Not poison, not fake medication, double doses of your actual blood pressure medication. Double doses. See, 3 pills instead of the prescribed 1.5, Paxton continued. Administered 3 consecutive days before your stroke. Enough to cause exactly what happened, a catastrophic blood pressure drop leading to ischemic stroke, but easy to excuse as an accidental overdose or medication error. Clever. Cecily was nothing if not clever. But there's more, Paxton said. He pulled out his phone, pulled up a video file. Your home security cameras. You had one in the kitchen aimed at the back door. He turned the phone so I could see. Grainy footage. Night vision. Timestamp September 5th, 1:43 a.m. Cecily entered the frame. Alone. She opened the medicine cabinet, pulled out the pill organizer I'd been using for years. Then she reached into her own purse and withdrew a small, unmarked container. One by one, she removed pills from the organizer and replaced them with pills from her container. Methodical, careful, deliberate. She repeated the process for 3 compartments: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then she returned the organizer to the cabinet, closed the door, left the kitchen. The whole process took 90 seconds. She did it again September 6th and 7th, Paxton said. Same time, same method. Making sure you got triple doses 3 days in a row. I stared at the frozen image on the phone screen. My daughter-in-law, in my kitchen. Tampering with medication while I slept upstairs, trusting that the pills in my organizer were what my doctor prescribed. This is attempted murder, Paxton said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Premeditated, documented. I can call the police right now. We have evidence that will hold up in court. I moved my hand to the alphabet card. Notyat. Paxton stared at me. Leland. CAMERASHOWSACTIONNOTINTENT. The hell it doesn't, Paxton said. She's swapping pills in the middle of the night. What other intent could there possibly be? ENAADHERTOSAYIT. Paxton wanted to call the police immediately. I stopped him again. Because camera footage showed her swapping pills, yes. But a good attorney could argue she was just organizing medication, that she didn't understand dosages, that it was negligence, not malice. I needed more. I needed her to say it herself. Needed her to confess in her own words that she knew what she was doing. Patience. Strategy. The same skills that built a company could be used to dismantle a conspiracy. But patience required time, and time I was learning was the one resource I didn't have. October 1st. Paxton arrived with a new timeline. 27 days, he said, without preamble. Until the board of directors votes on selling the company. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Stika. The investigator dug into Malcolm's communications. Paxton continued. He's been negotiating with Westbridge Holdings for 3 months, selling 70% of Harrington Aerospace shares. 15 to 20 million below market value. Below market value. Malcolm wasn't just selling my company. He was giving it away. In exchange, Paxton said, reading from the report, Malcolm retains CEO position, receives a private bonus of $200,000, and Westbridge agrees to absorb his personal debt as part of the acquisition cost. $1.8 million in debt vanished. Paid for by selling off the company I'd spent 35 years building at a discount that would make any legitimate investor sick. The board vote is scheduled for November 20th, Paxton said. Malcolm has been working the board members individually, telling them you're permanently incapacitated, that the company needs stable leadership, that this acquisition represents the best path forward for everyone. 50 days. My son planned to sell off what took me a lifetime to build, while I lay here unable to speak, unable to walk, unable to defend what was mine. But I knew something Malcolm and Cecily didn't. I was coming back. Slowly. Painfully. 1 second of sitting upright at a time. Vincent came 3 nights a week. Paxton was building a legal case that would bury them both. And I had one advantage they'd never considered. Greedy people always show their hand if you give them enough time. The question was whether I had enough time left to stop them before the board voted, before the company was sold, before my 35-year legacy was dismantled and distributed to strangers who'd bought it at a discount from my desperate drowning son. 50 days to stop the sale. But I had something Malcolm and Cecily didn't count on: patience, and the knowledge that greedy people always show their hand when you give them enough rope. The name on the Westbridge Holdings documents meant nothing to me until Paxton explained who Conrad Rafferty really was and what he was to Cecily. Conrad Rafferty. Paxton said on October 3rd, setting his laptop on the bed. Deal director at Westbridge Holdings, 42 years old, Harvard Business School, same graduating class as Cecily. He turned the screen toward me. A professional headshot, dark hair, expensive suit, the kind of polished confidence that comes from never having been told no. I'd never seen him before, so they dated for 3 years, Paxton continued. Before Cecily married Malcolm. The relationship ended when she accepted your son's proposal, but according to the investigator, they never really stopped communicating. He pulled up a second document: phone records, email, metadata, financial transactions. Prepaid phones registered under false names. Anonymous email accounts routed through privacy servers. They've been in contact the entire time she's been married to your son. The entire time. 8 years of marriage to Malcolm, 8 years of secret communication with an ex-boyfriend who just happened to be brokering the deal to buy my company at below market value. There's more, Paxton said. The investigator found a consulting firm registered in Delaware under Cecily's sister's name. That firm has been receiving quarterly payments from a Westbridge subsidiary for the past 2 years. $50,000 per quarter. Laundered through 3 shell companies, but traceable if you know where to look. $200,000 per year. For 2 years. While Malcolm spiraled into debt and embezzlement, Cecily had been building her own financial escape hatch with her ex-boyfriend's help. Does Malcolm know? I spelled. About Conrad, no, Paxton said. About the consulting firm, definitely not. Your son thinks he's negotiating this deal to save himself from the debt. He has no idea Cecily is running a parallel operation that benefits her and Conrad while using Malcolm as the front man. Cecily didn't just want my money. She wanted my money to hand it over to someone else. And Malcolm, my only son, was merely an instrument in her plan. A useful idiot with access to what she really wanted. This is fraud on top of fraud, Paxton said. Malcolm's embezzlement, Cecily's kickbacks, the below-market sale price that enriches Westbridge while destroying your company's value, and the medication tampering that started it all. He closed the laptop, looked at me with the expression I'd seen in boardrooms when we were about to move against a competitor. We have enough, he said. Criminal charges, civil suits, conservatorship, dismissal. We can stop this now. Notyat. Leland, Eneedtamtomakamistakes. Paxton studied me. Understanding settled across his features. You're going to force their hand, he said slowly. Make them panic. Get them to create more evidence. Blink. Blink. All right, Paxton said. But you're running out of time. I knew. October 8th was coming. The board vote was 20 days away, but I needed one more thing before I moved. I needed them scared. October 8th. Malcolm visited alone. Cecily had a meeting in Charlotte, he said, but he wanted to check on me. The performance of the dutiful son delivered to an audience of one he assumed couldn't understand. He sat in the chair beside my bed, talked about the weather, the company, mundane things that meant nothing. His voice carried the practiced tone of someone fulfilling an obligation. I waited until he stood to leave. Then I reached for the water glass on my bedside table. Not a trembling attempt. Not an involuntary spasm. A deliberate, controlled movement. My right hand gripped the glass, lifted it 6 inches, set it back down. Malcolm froze. 3 seconds. I counted them. His face shifted from routine concern to something sharper. Alarm. Calculation. The realization that the helpless father he'd been counting on was showing signs of becoming something else. Dad, he said quietly. Can you hear me? I kept my eyes unfocused. Didn't respond. Let him wonder whether it was intentional control or accidental muscle spasm. Malcolm left the room. Fast. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, then his voice. Cecily, we have a problem. I couldn't see him, but I could hear every word. He picked up a glass by himself, Malcolm said. Not shaking, not dropping it. He picked it up and set it down like he was in control. Cecily's voice came through the phone speaker, cold and sharp. Are you certain? I watched him do it. Silence on the line. I imagined Cecily calculating, recalibrating, adjusting her timeline. We'll get Dr. Fletcher to sign another evaluation, Cecily said. Today, documenting continued cognitive decline and lack of physical improvement, and tell Denise to report that he's been delirious, confused, talking nonsense. Oh, Denise has been... I don't care what Denise has been, Cecily cut him off. Tell her to report delirium or we'll find someone who will. Do it today, Malcolm. We can't afford him showing improvement before the conservatorship hearing. When is the hearing? It's October 16th. 8 days. The judge reviews Fletcher's evaluation, Denise's care reports, and our petition. If everything aligns, we get emergency conservatorship before the board vote. 8 days until the hearing. 20 days until the board vote. The timelines were compressing. What if he actually is recovering? Malcolm asked, and for the first time I heard something in his voice that might have been doubt, or fear, or the faint echo of the sun I'd raised before greed rewrote him. Well, then we accelerate everything, Cecily said. But he's not recovering, Malcolm. He had a massive stroke. People don't just bounce back from that without intensive therapy, and we made sure he didn't get therapy. The line went dead. Malcolm stood in the hallway for another moment. Then his footsteps retreated toward the front door. I lay in the bed, listening to the house settle into silence. I was waiting for that reaction. Not to panic them, but because I needed them to leave a trail. And they just did exactly what I needed. In 35 years of business, I'd learned one thing: greedy people always make mistakes when they're scared. They reach for quick fixes. They pressure witnesses. They forge documents and force false testimony. And every single action leaves evidence. Task 4.2. Evidence trails only matter if you live long enough to use them. Cecily had ordered Malcolm to forge evaluations and coerce false testimony, perfect documentation of conspiracy. But the conservatorship hearing was 6 days away, and I still couldn't walk. Then Paxton showed me something I'd completely forgotten. In 2015, you added a special provision to the trust, Paxton said on October 10th, pulling out a document I vaguely recognized. After Rosemary died, you were worried about sudden death without a clear succession plan. I remembered signing it, remembered the lawyer explaining the clause, remembered thinking it was overly cautious but harmless. The provision requires you to confirm your status every 90 days using a custom code only you know, Paxton continued. If 90 days pass without confirmation, the trust assumes incapacity or death. 10% of assets automatically transfer to the Rosemary Harrington Memorial Foundation. 10% of 40 to 60 million in total assets. $4 to $6 million moving beyond anyone's control. The 90-day window expired October 7th, Paxton said. 3 days ago. The automatic transfer triggered this morning. I stared at him. Malcolm noticed, Paxton said, pulling out his phone. He showed me an email. From Malcolm Harrington to Paxton Reeves, subject urgent, investment account discrepancy. Several $1 million transferred out of the family investment accounts this morning. I didn't authorize this. Did my father set up some kind of automatic payment before the stroke? I need to understand what's happening. Paxton's response had been deliberately vague, reviewing trust provisions, will advise. He doesn't understand what it means, Paxton said. But he knows money is moving beyond his reach, and he can't stop it without you. In 2015, I added that clause for a completely different reason: fear of dying suddenly, without a designated heir, without control over what I'd built. I never thought one day it would become my weapon. But here it was, a 10-year-old trap I'd set for death, now triggering at the perfect moment to protect my assets from my own son. Can Malcolm override it? I spelled. Not without proving you're alive and competent enough to disable it yourself, Paxton said. Which directly contradicts his conservatorship petition claiming you're permanently incapacitated. If he argues you're competent enough to manage the trust, he loses the conservatorship. If he argues you're incompetent, the automatic transfers continue, and he can't touch them. A perfect trap. One I'd built a decade ago without knowing I'd need it. How much time do we have? I spelled. Until the hearing, Paxton said. October 16th, 6 days. If Malcolm gets conservatorship, he'll have legal authority to restructure the trust. But if you can appear at that hearing and demonstrate capacity, everything stops. The conservatorship fails. Malcolm's authority evaporates. And we have enough evidence to bury him and Cecily both. 6 days. Could I walk in 6 days? Stand without support. Speak clearly enough to answer a judge's questions. Vincent came that night. 3 nights a week through the side door during the 45-minute camera glitches Paxton's contact arranged. Stand, Vincent said at 11:30 p.m. I gripped the bed rail. pushed. My right leg responded better than a week ago. My left leg trembled but held weight. I stood for 12 seconds before my left knee buckled. Again, Vincent said. We were making progress. Slow, painful, but progress. October 15th, 9 p.m., 5 days before the hearing. I was in bed practicing finger movements with my left hand when I heard the front door open. Cecily's voice. She wasn't supposed to be here tonight. Malcolm had mentioned she was staying in Charlotte for meetings. Footsteps in the hallway, then the kitchen. Shtiha. Denise, Cecily said. Her voice carried that sharp edge she used when she wanted someone to know they'd made a mistake. I need to see the security camera logs. Silence. Then Denise's voice, uncertain. Of course. Is something wrong? Let's find out. I heard them moving. The creak of the office chair. The click of keyboard keys. Here, Cecily said after a long moment. October 8th through 15th. Every night. 3 camera segments show 45 minutes of missing footage. Same time window. 11:30 p.m. to 12:15 a.m. I don't know anything about that, Denise said. Too fast, too defensive. Don't lie to me, Cecily said quietly. Equipment failures don't happen on schedule. Someone is entering this house during those gaps. Who? Silence. Unseti Denise. Cecily continued, her voice dropping to something colder. You're providing medical care without nursing credentials. Do you know what the state board does to unlicensed caregivers who falsify qualifications? Fines, criminal charges, permanent prohibition from healthcare work. I didn't falsify. Your resume says experienced caregiver. It doesn't mention you were fired from your last position for medication errors. I did my research. Medication errors. I didn't know if that was true or if Cecily was inventing leverage. Either way, it was working. Please, Denise whispered. I need this job. Then tell me what's happening during those camera gaps, Cecily said. Or I make one phone call and you're unemployed and unemployable. Your choice. 10 seconds of silence. Someone comes at night. Denise said the words, tumbling out. A physical therapist. He works with Mr. Harrington. I don't know his name. He comes through the side door. How long has this been happening? 3 weeks, 3 nights a week. And my father-in-law, Cecily's voice sharpened. Is he responding to the therapy? Another pause. Then, yes, he's progressing. Faster than I expected. I heard footsteps. Cecily's heels clicking across the kitchen tile. Growing louder, coming toward the bedroom. The door opened. Cecily stood in the doorway, silhouetted by hallway light. She looked at me, lying in the bed, eyes, half-closed body, still the picture of helpless incapacity. She smiled, then closed the door. I lay in the darkness, listening to her heels click back down the hallway. Listening to her tell Denise something I couldn't quite hear. Listening to the front door close and her car start in the driveway. From tonight, the clock was ticking. Cecily knew about the therapy, knew I was progressing, and she had 5 days to stop me before the hearing. 5 days until the hearing. But Cecily knew I was progressing. The question wasn't whether she'd move against me, it was how fast. Denise entered my room the next morning and couldn't look me in the eye. She stood in the doorway for a moment, then walked to the chair beside my bed. Sat down slowly. Her hands twisted together in her lap. Mr. Harrington, she said quietly, still not meeting my gaze. I need to tell you something. I waited. Mrs. Cecily came back last night. Denise continued. She reviewed the security cameras. She saw the gaps in the footage. She knew someone was coming here. I knew all this. I'd heard it through the bedroom door. Yeah, she threatened me, Denise said. Said she'd report me to the state board. Said I'd lose my license and never work again. Denise didn't have a license. Just years of experience and desperation for employment that Cecily had weaponized perfectly. I had to tell her you were making progress. Denise said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were red. I told her you could sit up, that you were responding to therapy. She stopped. The silence stretched between us. I'm sorry, Denise whispered. I reached for the alphabet card on the nightstand. My hand moved steadily now, weeks of secret practice paying off in small, crucial ways. WHATLSE. Denise watched me spell, understood the question. I didn't tell her you could walk, she said, her voice barely audible. And I didn't tell her you could talk. My finger stopped on the card. Denise stood, walked to the door, paused without turning around. The phone is still in the drawer, she said. Then she left. I lay in the bed, processing what had just happened. Denise had betrayed me partially. Told Cecily enough to save herself from immediate threat, but protected the most critical secrets. The ability to walk meant mobility, escape, independence. The ability to talk meant I could testify, could speak to judges and lawyers and doctors without alphabet cards. Cecily thought I was making progress, but she didn't know how much. I didn't know why Denise did it. Maybe she was terrified of losing everything. Maybe a piece of her conscience remained intact despite the pressure. What I knew for certain, she'd bought me more time. Whether it was enough time remained to be seen. Before I tell you what Cecily announced next, I need to ask, do you think Denise protecting those secrets was courage or fear? Comment A if you think it was courage, B if you think it was fear, and tell me why in one sentence. A quick note, what follows includes some dramatized details to convey the emotional impact. The lesson is what matters. October 17th, Thursday. 3 days before the conservatorship hearing. 2 days before the board vote on the company sale. I heard Cecily's car in the driveway at 10 a.m. She rarely came during daylight hours, preferred to maintain the image of the devoted daughter-in-law visiting evenings after work. But today she walked straight into the house like she owned it. Malcolm was already there. I'd heard him in the kitchen an hour earlier talking to Denise about my breakfast routine. Cecily found him in the living room. I couldn't see them, but sound carried through the old house in ways people forgot. We're transferring him Monday morning, Cecily said without preamble. Transferring him where? Malcolm asked. She's Sunrise Memory Care. 40 minutes outside Charlotte. It's a locked facility specializing in patients with severe cognitive decline. Silence. Cecily, he doesn't have dementia, Malcolm said quietly. Shakutul. The stroke caused significant neurological damage. Cecily replied, her voice carrying that practiced professional tone. Dr. Fletcher's evaluation confirms progressive decline, and now that he's showing some physical improvement, he needs 24/7 professional supervision for his own safety, for his own safety. The lie was so smooth it almost sounded like truth. When did you arrange this? Malcolm asked. Yesterday. After I discovered someone has been providing unauthorized therapy. We can't have unqualified people working with him. The liability alone. What unauthorized therapy? Someone's been entering the house at night, Cecily said. Working with your father. Denise admitted it when I confronted her. Tia, and you think moving him to a memory care facility 40 minutes away is the solution? I think controlling his care environment is the solution, Cecily said sharply. Right now, Paxton Reeves can visit whenever he wants. Random therapists can sneak in through side doors. Doctors we don't know can examine him and write reports that contradict our conservatorship petition. At Sunrise, we control who sees him. We control what gets documented. We control everything. The truth delivered without pretense. Not for my safety, for their control. The intake is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m., Cecily continued. I've already signed the paperwork. You're listed as secondary contact. The conservatorship hearing is next week, and by then he'll be in a secure facility with professional documentation supporting our petition. What about the board vote? Malcolm asked. If he's in a memory care facility, people will ask questions. People will see a devoted family making difficult but necessary decisions for an incapacitated father, Cecily said. The board will vote to approve the Westbridge sale because you're the only one left with decision-making capacity. Everything proceeds as planned. Footsteps. Cecily's heels clicking toward the front door. I'll see you Monday morning, she said. 9 a.m., don't be late. The door closed. Malcolm stayed in the living room. I heard him sit down heavily on the couch. Heard him release a long breath. But he didn't call Cecily back. Didn't object. Didn't do anything except sit there in silence while his wife scheduled my disappearance. 2 days. Monday morning, they'd load me into an ambulance and transport me to a locked facility where Paxton couldn't reach me, where Vincent couldn't continue therapy, where I'd be completely isolated from anyone who might help me stop what was happening. 2 days, and I still couldn't walk 10 steps unassisted without trembling. I lay in the dark that night, wondering was I playing a game of chess where my opponent had declared checkmate long ago, or was there one move left they hadn't seen coming? 2 days to find a move they hadn't seen. The move came from the last place I expected. The ambulance arrived Monday morning at 7:30. The fog hanging over Lake Norman reminded me of another morning, September 8th, 6 weeks ago, when my life ended on the grass and this war began. 2 paramedics wheeled the stretcher through my bedroom. Professional. Efficient. They'd transported incapacitated patients 1,000 times following family instructions without question. I lay, staring at the ceiling, my body still except for breathing. 6 weeks of secret recovery, and I still couldn't walk more than 15 steps without support. Progress, yes, but not enough. They wheeled me through the hallway, past the kitchen where Cecily had swapped pills, past the living room where Malcolm had listened to his wife plan my disappearance, out the front door. Malcolm stood on the porch, Cecily beside him. The devoted son and daughter-in-law watching the difficult but necessary transfer. The stretcher paused at the steps while the paramedics adjusted their grip. Malcolm looked at me. Something in his eyes shifted. I saw it even through my practiced vacant expression. Not love, not quite guilt. Something more complicated. He leaned toward Cecily, whispered, "Maybe we should stop," Malcolm said quietly. "Hire physical therapy. Give him a chance." Cecily turned her head slowly. Her expression didn't change, but her voice dropped to something colder than I'd ever heard. Do you remember the investment account from March?" she asked. "And May, if your father returns and resumes management, how will you explain those transfers to the auditors, to the police?" Malcolm's face went pale. "You made choices, Malcolm," Cecily continued. "You don't get to unmake them now because you're having second thoughts." Malcolm looked at me, then back at Cecily, then at his shoes. He said nothing. The paramedics started down the steps. As the stretcher passed, Malcolm, he reached out, touching my shoulder in farewell. His hand brushed my coat pocket. Something small and cold slipped inside. I felt the weight settle against my chest. Metal. A key, maybe. I didn't know what it opened, but I knew what it meant. It was the only thing my son could do for me right now. And he did it. The ambulance doors closed. Lake Norman disappeared as we drove 40 minutes north to a facility I'd never seen, following a schedule I'd never agreed to. Sunrise Memory Care was clean, modern, secure. The kind of place families chose when they wanted to feel good about locking away relatives they couldn't manage. My room was second floor, single occupancy. Window overlooking a courtyard I couldn't reach. Door that locked from outside. Everything designed for safety, their word for control. They transferred me to bed, explained routines I couldn't respond to, left me alone 40 minutes from everyone who might help. But Cecily had made one mistake. The conservatorship petition was still unresolved. Until a judge granted it, I retained my legal rights. which meant my attorney had unalterable authority to visit. Paxton arrived at 2 p.m. Denise had texted him the facility name and address from the parking lot before the ambulance pulled away, one last thing she could do without Cecily knowing. 10 minutes, the nurse said. He tires easily. The door closed. Paxton pulled a chair to my bedside. They moved fast, he said quietly. But we're not done. The hearing is still scheduled. I moved my hand to the coat pocket. Pointed. Paxton reached in, pulled out the small metal object, a key. Brass. Old. With an engraved mark, the logo of a filing cabinet manufacturer I recognized. This is from Malcolm, Paxton asked. I blinked twice. Yes. Paxton examined it. Filing cabinet key. Malcolm's office at Harrington Aerospace. I'll go now. He left. Evening came. I lay in the unfamiliar room, wondering what the key unlocked and whether it would matter. Paxton returned the next morning. His face told me everything. The filing cabinet in Malcolm's office, Paxton said, closing the door. Bottom drawer hidden under old contracts. Detailed logs of every embezzlement transaction. Dates, amounts, account numbers. Malcolm documented everything. Why would Malcolm keep evidence of his own crimes? Shook insurance, Paxton said. Or stupidity. Maybe both. But there was something else. He pulled out his phone, showed me a small digital voice recorder. This was taped to the underside of the drawer, Paxton said. Malcolm must have hidden it. Recorded a conversation without Cecily knowing. He pressed play. Cecily's voice filled the room. Clear. Cold. Unmistakable. Once the company is sold, Malcolm takes full responsibility. I'll state he altered the medications, forged the documents, and forced me to go along. I was a victim of his manipulation. Prosecutors love that narrative, abused wife controlling husband. They'll believe me. Another voice, male, unfamiliar. And the kickback accounts, untraceable, Cecily said. Registered under shell companies Conrad set up years ago. By the time anyone connects them to me, I'll be in Europe with money they can't touch. What about Malcolm? Comme si. What about him? Cecily's voice carried a shrug I could hear. He served his purpose. He gave me access. Once the sale completes and he's taken responsibility for everything I'm done, let him explain to the police how he tried to kill his own father. The recording ended. I lay staring at Paxton. I thought I knew everything. I was wrong. Cecily wasn't just betraying me. She was preparing to betray my son, the man who'd betrayed me for her, who'd chosen her over me, who'd let her convince him to steal and lie and drug his own father. Malcolm was going to lose everything. The company, his freedom, his life. And Cecily had planned it from the beginning. Suddenly I realized this war had one more victim I hadn't accounted for. And that changed everything. What do you want to do? Paxton asked quietly. I reached for the alphabet card he'd brought. STOPTHEMBOTH. Both, Paxton repeated. Malcolm and Cecily. Blink, blink. Und even if after what Malcolm did to you. I spelled again HEISSTILLLMYSON. Paxton nodded slowly. Understanding settled over his face. All right, he said. Then we have work to do. Stop them both. The words felt strange, defending the son who'd betrayed me from the wife who'd orchestrated it all. But Malcolm was drowning in Cecily's web, and whether he deserved rescue or not, I couldn't watch him disappear without trying. The irony wasn't lost on me. The nursing home Cecily chose to isolate me became the place where I finally completed my recovery. Sunrise Memory Care was 40 minutes from Charlotte, yes. But the conservatorship petition remained unadjudicated. Until a judge declared me legally incapacitated, I retained my rights. Which meant Vincent Hayes could visit as a family friend, and the facility legally couldn't stop him. Cecily had locked me away, but she'd forgotten to finish the legal paperwork first. Vincent came every other day starting October 21st. No more midnight sessions through camera glitches. He walked through the front door, signed the visitor log, and worked with me in the physical therapy room like any legitimate therapist, helping any legitimate patient. 3 weeks. That's what we had before the Brooks Foundation gala I'd been planning since the moment Paxton found that voice recorder. October 21st through November 15th. 25 days of the most intense physical work I'd done in my life. Walking the hallways, first with a walker, then with a cane, then without support, Vincent spotting me as I took 20 steps, then 30, then 40. Climbing stairs, one at a time, gripping the rail so hard my knuckles went white. Then 2 stairs, then a full flight. Speaking. Short sentences, at first my voice rough from weeks of silence. Then longer paragraphs building strength in muscles that controlled speech, the same way I'd rebuilt muscles that controlled walking. November 15th, 3 weeks into recovery, 5 days before the board vote. I walked 50 steps across the facility gym without the cane. Vincent stood at the far end, watching arms crossed. 50 steps, he said when I reached him. No assistance, you're ready. I was. My right leg still trembled after extended exertion. My left side would probably never match my right for strength. But I could walk, could speak, could do everything I needed to do. Why not walk without the cane at the gala? Vincent asked. For greater impact. Show them you don't need it anymore. I shook my head. Oh no. I said the words coming clear now, only a slight roughness at the edges. I want them to hear me coming, step by step. Vincent studied me. Understanding settled across his features. The cane isn't a weakness, he said slowly. You're making it a weapon. And a statement, I corrected. I could walk without it, but I'm choosing to use it. And they'll hear every single step on that marble floor. Vincent smiled. Your son has no idea what's coming. Neither does his wife, I said. That's the point. Thursday, November 20th, 10 a.m. 5 days after my 50-step milestone. 1 day before the gala. The company boardroom on the 18th floor of the Harrington Aerospace building. I'd been in that room 1,000 times, built the company in that room, made decisions that employed 170 people and generated over $50 million in annual revenue. Today I was watching it on a video screen from 40 minutes away. Paxton had arranged everything. The surprise video call, the witnesses, the timing calculated to interrupt Malcolm's final signing of the Westbridge deal. Malcolm sat at the head of the conference table, the seat I'd occupied for 35 years. Around him sat 8 board members, people I'd worked with for decades, people who'd received Malcolm's carefully crafted narrative about my permanent incapacity. Conrad Rafferty appeared on the large screen at the far end of the room video feed from Westbridge Holdings in New York. Next to him, I could see Cecily in the boardroom hallway watching through the glass, waiting to celebrate when the signatures were complete. Documents lay spread across the table. The sale agreement, transfer of 70% ownership, Malcolm's future as a figurehead CEO, while Westbridge gutted everything I'd built. Malcolm reached for his pen. The main video screen flickered. Conrad Rafferty's feed minimized to a corner window. A new image filled the screen. Me, sitting upright in a chair at Sunrise Memory Care. Behind me, clearly visible, Dr. Harold Mercer holding a medical file. Paxton Reeves with legal documents. 2 board members who'd driven 40 minutes to witness this moment. The boardroom went silent. Malcolm's pen froze halfway to the signature line. Good morning. I said, my voice carrying through the boardroom speakers with only the slightest roughness. I apologize for the interruption. Cecily appeared in the boardroom doorway. Her face went white. Not that this vote is void, I continued. Dr. Mercer has completed an independent neurological evaluation. I retain full mental capacity. The conservatorship petition will be dismissed, and as majority shareholder and active trustee, I'm exercising my right to block this sale. Malcolm stood slowly. Dad, the Westbridge deal is terminated, I said. Effective immediately. Conrad Rafferty's video window went dark. He disconnected. Smart man. However, I continued looking at the board members through the camera. I recognize that questions remain about my capacity, my recovery, and the management of this company during my absence. Therefore, I invite all of you board members, executives, and anyone else interested to the Brooks Foundation Gala tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. I'll be attending. I have something to say. Paxton stepped into frame beside me. Legal notice has been filed with the court. Mr. Harrington's rights are fully restored. Any actions taken under the assumption of incapacity are subject to reversal. Questions can be directed to my office. The video feed ended. I sat in the quiet room at Sunrise Memory Care. Paxton beside me, Dr. Mercer packing his medical files, the two board members who'd driven out as witnesses shaking my hand. The sale was blocked. Conrad Rafferty had disconnected his feed the moment he realized the deal was dead. Malcolm stood frozen at the head of my table, his carefully constructed plan collapsing in real time. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Tomorrow night, 400 witnesses would hear everything. Not just the board. Not just executives. Everyone. The evidence. The betrayal. The medication tampering. The embezzlement. Cecily's plan to sacrifice Malcolm. All of it. Public, permanent, irreversible. Paxton looked at me. You could have exposed everything today. Why wait? Because today was about stopping the sale, I said. Tomorrow is about justice. And Malcolm, I thought about the key he'd slipped into my pocket. The voice recorder he'd hidden. The evidence he'd preserved even while drowning in Cecily's manipulation. Tomorrow. I said, Malcolm gets a choice he doesn't know he has yet. Tomorrow night, 400 witnesses. Malcolm would get a choice he didn't know he had yet, and I would finally speak the truth I'd been holding for 74 days. But first, I needed to face the one person whose opinion mattered more than all 400 witnesses combined. The room at Sunrise Memory Care smelled like lavender and old wood. My daughter Saskia had brought candles, 38 years old, dark hair like her late mother's, with the same quiet strength that had carried her through law school while raising a son. She sat in the chair beside my bed, the amber light from the bedside lamp softening the worry lines around her eyes. Tomorrow. I said the word heavy between us. Saskia nodded. She'd driven from Asheville the moment I'd called, leaving her husband Quincy to pack for the trip. 40 years old, an architect, he understood that some conversations required space. I brought these, Saskia said, gesturing to the candles. Mom's favorite. Lavender. From the house before she stopped. Before everything changed. Before Malcolm's betrayal. Before my stroke. Before the family we'd been became the wreckage we were now. I picked up the cane leaning against the bed. Ran my fingers over the smooth wood. Tomorrow I'd walk with this. Not because I needed it, Vincent had proven I could manage 50 steps without support. But because I wanted 400 people to hear me coming. Do you ever doubt it? I asked quietly. Whether exposing him publicly is the right thing. Whether humiliation serves justice or just creates more pain. Saskia was quiet for a long moment. Graham asked me something this morning, she said finally. He asked if you were a good man or a bad man doing a good thing. I looked at her. I told him I'd let him decide after tonight, Saskia continued. Her voice cracked slightly. He's 11 years old, Dad. He's going to watch his father exposed in front of 400 people. He's going to see his family destroy itself on a stage. And I don't know if that's justice or just cruelty. I set the cane down. Remembered another moment 3 decades ago. Malcolm at 12 caught cheating on a math test. I'd made him confess to the teacher, publicly believing public accountability built character. He'd never forgiven me for the humiliation. Had cried in the car going home asking why I couldn't have just talked to him privately. Now I was doing it again, on a larger scale, in front of 400 witnesses instead of one classroom. And I wondered, had I learned nothing? Was I repeating the same punishment, just with higher stakes? Your mother, I started. But Vivian wasn't Saskia's mother. Vivian was the woman I'd married 5 years after my first wife died, 66 years old now, who'd chosen silence and money over truth when Malcolm's conspiracy unfolded. Who'd sat beside Malcolm accepting congratulations while I lay paralyzed 40 miles away. Saskia understood. Mom would have wanted private resolution, she said. She always believed family problems should stay in the family. But Dad, some betrayals are too large for private conversations. Malcolm didn't just steal from you. He tried to erase you. That's not a family problem. That's a crime. And Cecily, I asked. Cecily's been playing a game none of us saw, Saskia said. Including Malcolm. Tomorrow he finds out he's been a pawn this whole time. That might be the cruelest part, showing him he was betrayed by the person he betrayed you for. I picked up the cane again. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'd walk into that ballroom. Tomorrow Graham would watch and decide if his grandfather was good or bad. Tomorrow Malcolm would face a choice fight or confess. And tomorrow I'd have to live with whatever I'd become in pursuit of justice. It's theater, I said quietly, looking at the cane. But theater in service of truth. Saskia reached over and squeezed my hand. Then make sure the truth is worth the performance. November 21st, 7:45 p.m. The Brooks Foundation Gala at the Ivies Hotel, Charlotte. I stood outside the ballroom doors, Paxton beside me, the cane in my right hand. Through the doors, I could hear music, conversation, the sound of 400 people who had no idea what was about to happen. Inside, Malcolm and Cecily sat at the head table accepting congratulations. Vivian beside them, wearing the diamond necklace Malcolm had bought her last Christmas. My wife, who'd chosen their side without hesitation. Saskia and Quincy were already seated in the third row. I'd seen them enter 10 minutes earlier. And beside Saskia sat Graham, 11 years old, brown hair, his father's eyes, wearing a suit that was slightly too big. The boy who would judge me tonight. Paxton looked at me. Ready? I nodded. The doors opened. I stepped through wearing the navy suit from 40 years of board meetings. Walked slowly, deliberately, the cane in my right hand. Click, click, click. The sound cut through conversation like a blade. A server's tray wobbled. Ice cubes settled in glasses. Programs rustled as they were set down. The ballroom went silent in waves, people nearest the door first, then spreading outward as heads turned. 400 people, staring. Malcolm's wine glass froze halfway to his mouth. Cecily's hand gripped the table edge, knuckles white. Vivian's face drained of color. I didn't look at them. Not yet. I looked at the audience, at the board members and executives and donors and witnesses, at Saskia, whose hand covered Graham's, at my grandson, whose wide eyes tracked my every step. I walked the center aisle, each footfall echoing on marble. Click, click, click. The sound became tactile, almost violent in the absolute silence. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished shoes. Silk dresses held breath. The weight of my navy suit jacket pressed against my shoulders. 400 pairs of eyes felt like physical weight. Paxton stepped onto the stage from the side entrance, carrying a leather portfolio. I reached the stage, climbed the 3 steps, no wobble, no tremor, Vincent's training holding. Walked to the podium, turned to face the audience. 400 silent witnesses. I set the cane against the podium. The click resonated through the ballroom. reached for the microphone, cold metal against my palm. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Thank you for coming to hear the truth about Harrington Aerospace." Malcolm pushed back his chair. The screech of wood on marble broke the silence. Cecily grabbed his wrist, hissing something I couldn't hear. Malcolm shook her off, stood, stepped toward the stage, and his face transformed into something I hadn't seen in 40 years, the courtroom expression. The one that had destroyed corporate opponents for 2 decades. The look that said he was done being defensive. My son was going to fight. Malcolm's hand gripped the stage edge, his courtroom voice filling the ballroom. The voice that had won corporate negotiations. The voice that had destroyed opponents. "My father is not well," Malcolm said, projecting to the 400 witnesses. "He's been in memory care for months. This appearance, whatever this is clearly a sign of confusion, of stress. He needs medical attention, not a microphone." I set down the microphone, picked up the cane leaning against the podium. Then I walked across the stage, 20 steps, without the cane, without support, without trembling. I set the cane against the wall, returned to the podium, picked up the microphone. "I used the cane," I said clearly, "because I wanted you to hear me coming, not because I needed it. Dr. Harold Mercer has certified full neurological recovery. I'm here because I have something to say about what happened to me and what my son did while I couldn't speak." Malcolm's courtroom expression cracked. I opened the leather portfolio. 3 layers of evidence, I said. Layer 1, what happened to me. Layer 2, what was stolen. Layer 3, what they said when they thought no one was listening. Paxton activated the projection screens on either side of the stage. Medical documents appeared. Lab results. Security camera footage. September 5th. I said. My daughter-in-law Cecily brought me a new pill organizer. Said my doctor had updated my prescription. September 5th, 6th, and 7th security camera footage shows her alone in my kitchen, after midnight transferring pills from an unmarked container into that organizer. The screens showed exactly that. Cecily's face clearly visible. Timestamps irrefutable. September 8th, 7:15 a.m., I continued. I took the pills from that organizer with my breakfast. By 7:30, I was lying on the grass with a stroke. Lab analysis of the remaining pills shows double doses of blood pressure medication. 3 consecutive days. Enough to guarantee the catastrophic event they needed. Cecily stood from the head table. "This is documented," I said. "Medical records, lab results, camera footage, layer 1 complete." The screens shifted. Financial documents, bank transfers, email correspondence. Layer 2, I said. Malcolm embezzled nearly $2 million from Harrington Aerospace over 18 months. Failed real estate investments, hard money loans, covered by stealing from the company he was supposed to manage. Malcolm's face went white. The Westbridge sale, I continued, was structured to hide that theft. 70% ownership transferred at 15 to 20 million below market value. In exchange, Malcolm retains CEO position, receives 200,000 bonus, and his debt disappears. But Cecily negotiated something Malcolm didn't know about: kickback payments routed through shell companies to offshore accounts she controls. Payments totaling over 400,000 so far. The screens showed email chains. Cecily's name, Conrad Rafferty's name, account transfers. My son thought he was stealing from me to save himself, I said. He didn't know his wife was stealing from both of us. I looked at Malcolm, looked at the boy I'd raised, now 42 years old, standing at the base of the stage with his world collapsing. You were 11 when I taught you that integrity matters more than winning, I said quietly. Do you remember? Malcolm said nothing. But in the third row, Graham Malcolm's 11-year-old son, my grandson, watched his father with eyes that understood more than anyone wanted them to. "And layer 3, I said. Paxton pressed play on the audio file. Cecily's voice filled the ballroom through the speaker system, clear, cold, unmistakable. "Once the company is sold, Malcolm takes full responsibility. I'll state he altered the medications, forged the documents, and forced me to go along. Prosecutors love that narrative abused wife controlling husband. They'll believe me. By the time anyone connects the offshore accounts to me, I'll be in Europe with money they can't touch." 400 people gasped. The sound filled the ballroom like a wave. Malcolm turned to Cecily. "You recorded me. You set me up from the beginning." "Malcolm," Cecily said, her voice tight. "Don't say anything else. You were planning to let me go to prison while you disappeared." Malcolm's voice rose. "For crimes you committed. See, I never touched his medication," Malcolm said, spinning back to face the audience. "That was all her. I didn't know about the pills until after the stroke. I swear." "You canceled his physical therapy," Cecily shot back. "You signed the nursing home papers. You told me to move faster because you said we had to. Because you said the audit would." They were destroying each other, providing the missing pieces of proof. Each accusation, another nail in both their coffins. Enough," Vivian said. My wife stood from the head table, 66 years old, diamond necklace catching chandelier light. The woman who'd sat silent through every moment of this conspiracy. "Malcolm, stop talking," Vivian said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "Both of you, stop talking right now." The ballroom went silent. "You knew," I said from the podium. "Didn't you, Vivian? You knew what they were doing." "I knew Malcolm was struggling financially," Orville said carefully. "I didn't know." "You knew," I repeated. "September 9th. You visited me in the ICU. Malcolm told you they were canceling therapy. You said nothing. You chose their side." Vivian's face went pale. She'd just confirmed it. In front of 400 witnesses, the side door opened. 2 people entered. A woman in a dark suit, 40-something, badge visible on her belt. A man beside her, same age, same bearing. Detective Sarah Brennan, Charlotte Mecklenburg, PD Financial Crimes Unit. She'd been coordinating with Paxton for months, waiting for this moment. Her partner, Detective Marcus Cole, moved to the other exit. "Mr. Harrington," Detective Brennan said, approaching Malcolm. "We'd like you to come with us." Malcolm looked at me, then at Cecily, then at his son sitting in the third row. "Dad," Malcolm said quietly. "I'm sorry, I—" "Don't," I said. "Just go." Detective Brennan reached Malcolm first hand, moving to her badge. Cecily backed away toward the side exit, but Detective Cole was already there. Vivian stood frozen at the head table, her diamond necklace catching chandelier light, realizing she'd just incriminated herself by trying to stop them from talking. Graham's small hand slipped into Malcolm's before the handcuffs closed, and I understood that justice and mercy were about to war inside me for months. The 11-year-old boy, my grandson, ran from Saskia's side in the third row and reached his father just as Detective Brennan stepped forward. Graham didn't say anything, just took Malcolm's hand. Malcolm looked down at his son, then up at me standing on the stage. "I'm sorry," Malcolm said. "I didn't respond. Couldn't." Because watching Graham hold his father's hand despite everything he'd just heard made me wonder for the first time, was public exposure justice, or was it cruelty dressed as righteousness? The detectives led them out. Malcolm, Cecily. Orville stayed. She wasn't under arrest, yet just implicated. 400 witnesses watched in silence, and Graham stood alone in the center aisle until Saskia reached him and pulled him close. 3 weeks later, the legal machinery processed what I'd started. Paxton met me at a coffee shop near the courthouse. Early December, cold enough for winter coats, but not yet freezing. He spread documents across the table between us. Jim Malcolm's facing grand embezzlement, forged power of attorney, and elder abuse charges, Paxton said. His attorney is claiming Cecily masterminded everything that Malcolm was manipulated. The DA isn't buying it. And Cecily, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Her attorney is trying to flip the narrative, claiming Malcolm controlled her. Also not working. The Westbridge deal had collapsed within hours of the gala. Conrad Rafferty's name appeared in enough documentation that investigators were building cases in multiple states. The company he'd used as cover was under federal investigation. "What about Vivian?" I asked. Paxton's expression darkened. "Accessory after the fact? She knew about the crimes and said nothing. Tried to prevent their confession at the gala. That's a crime too. She's cooperating now, gave a statement admitting she knew Malcolm had canceled your therapy, knew about the nursing home transfer, chose not to intervene. Accessory after the fact. My wife. The woman I'd married 5 years after my first wife died. She'd chosen their side and now faced criminal charges for that choice. Plea deals, I asked. The DA wants to talk, Paxton said. Especially with Malcolm. But nothing's decided yet. December 8th. I entered the Harrington Aerospace building for the first time in 8 months. That same week I signed the permits for a new manufacturing facility outside the city, a separate venture built from scratch that would answer to no one but me. Employees stared as I walked through the lobby. Some looked relieved, some looked uncomfortable. All of them had read the news coverage of the gala. My office was exactly as I'd left it. Dust on the furniture. The 1991 architectural model on the shelf, 42 houses, my first neighborhood development. I'd kept it as a reminder of where the company started. Now it looked like a child's toy. Proof that building things was easier than protecting them. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, stared at the blank email composition screen. Paxton stood in the doorway. Your PR team wants to draft a statement. We know, I said. I started typing. We to all employees, subject what happened. On I will not insult you with corporate language, I wrote. My son attempted to steal this company through embezzlement and fraud. My daughter-in-law assisted him. I was incapacitated by a stroke they caused by tampering with my medication. I spent 2 months recovering in secret while building evidence to stop them. The legal process is ongoing. I'm back. We rebuild now. Paxton read over my shoulder. Your PR team will have a heart attack. Good, I said. We've had enough lies. I hit send. 517 employees received that email within seconds. No polish, no spin, just truth. Was it justice if it destroyed Graham's childhood? Or was that the price truth demanded? December 15th, mid-afternoon. I sat across from Vivian in a neutral counseling office in uptown Charlotte. She looked older, 66, going on 80. The composure she'd always maintained, the perfect hair, the careful makeup, the diamond necklace, all of it was gone. She wore jeans and a sweater. Her hands trembled when she picked up her coffee cup. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly. You asked? I replied. I said yes. Silence stretched between us. The counselor had offered to mediate, but I'd refused. This conversation needed to happen without a buffer. I viewed you as a problem to be solved, Vivian said finally. Not as a person. When Malcolm came to me panicking about the audit, about the money he'd stolen, I didn't think about you lying in that hospital bed. I thought about protecting him, about protecting myself. That's the truth, I said, and that is why this story was able to happen. Vivian continued. Because I forgot you were human. Because I chose comfort over conscience. Her hands shook harder. She set down the coffee cup before she spilled it. I don't expect forgiveness, Vivian said. I just wanted you to hear me say it. I was wrong. Completely. And I'm sorry. I looked at the woman I'd married. The woman who'd shared my home for 5 years. The woman who'd chosen Malcolm over me without hesitation. I forgive you, I said. Vivian's head jerked up. What? Not because you deserve it, I continued, but because I refuse to carry this burden. You made your choice. You'll face legal consequences, but I won't spend the rest of my life hating you for it. That would give you more power over me than you ever earned. Something shifted in my chest. Not magnanimity, not victory, just lightness. Forgiveness freed me, not her, me. Thank you, Vivian whispered. I stood. Goodbye, Vivian. I walked out of the counseling office into December sunlight. Cold air on my face. My phone rang before I reached the car. Saskia's name on the screen. Dad, she said when I answered. Her voice was tight. Graham asked if he can talk to you. He has questions about what happened. About Malcolm. Questions I can't answer. I leaned against the car, looked at the sky, thought about an 11-year-old boy who'd watched his family destroy itself on a stage in front of 400 people. When, I asked. Whenever you're ready, Saskia said. But Dad, he's been carrying these questions for 3 weeks. I think he needs to ask them soon. Tomorrow, I said. Tell him tomorrow. Tomorrow came. I met Graham at Amelie's French Bakery, a quiet place in Charlotte, where the noise of espresso machines provided cover for difficult conversations. He sat across from me with a spiral notebook 11 years old, wearing a button-up shirt that was slightly too formal for a coffee shop. Saskia had dropped him off 10 minutes early, giving us space. Graham's first question, written in careful pencil, was the hardest. Is my dad a bad person, or did he just do bad things? I looked at the words, at the careful loops of an 11-year-old's handwriting, at the question that had probably kept him awake for 3 weeks. People aren't math problems with one answer, I said slowly. Your dad made choices that hurt people, including me. That's true. It's also true that he's still my son. But you told everyone what he did, Graham said. At the gala, in front of everybody. I did. Why not just talk to him? The same question Malcolm had asked in the detention center. The question that assumed private conversations could solve public crimes. Because some betrayals are too large for private resolution, I said. Your dad didn't just make a mistake, Graham. He committed crimes. He hurt me deliberately. And when people commit crimes, there are consequences. Public ones. Graham's coffee sat untouched, cooling in its mug. He looked down at his notebook, read the next question. Do you still love him? The question I hadn't wanted to face. Because the answer was complicated and hurt in ways I couldn't explain to an 11-year-old. Yes, I said. That's why it hurt so much. Graham looked up. If you love him, why did you? Because love doesn't mean accepting everything someone does, I said. It means caring about them while still holding them accountable. Your dad is my son. I love him. And I also had to stop him. Graham was quiet for a long time. Then, Mom says I don't have to choose. Between loving him and knowing what he did was wrong. Your mom is right, I said. You don't have to choose. You can love your dad and still be angry about his choices. Both can be true at the same time. We sat in silence. The coffee shop hummed around us. Graham closed his notebook. Thank you, Grandpa, he said quietly. Late December, I put the Lake Norman mansion on the market. Saskia stood with me on the back lawn, where I'd collapsed 74 days earlier. The grass where my life had ended and this war had begun. You're really leaving this place? She asked. I built it to prove something, I said. to show that a kid from nowhere could build an empire. I don't need to prove that anymore. The mansion sold in 4 days. 3 acres, 8 bedrooms, lake view. Someone else's monument now. I bought a smaller house near Cornelius. 3 bedrooms, lakeside. Wide front porch with rocking chairs. Simple. The 1991 architectural model from my office went on a shelf in the living room. 42 houses, my first neighborhood, the beginning of everything. The mansion had been a monument. The new house was a home. The difference was the same as between being admired and being known. Saskia helped me move in 2 days before Christmas. We sat on the porch that evening, rocking chairs creaking, watching the lake reflect winter sunset. This is better, Saskia said. I looked at my daughter. 38 years old. The only family member who'd stood beside me through everything. Yes, I said, it is. Saskia sat beside me in silence, and I realized this not the mansion, not the company, not even the justice, this quiet presence was what wealth was supposed to buy. And I'd almost lost it chasing monuments. December 29th, the Harrington Foundation office, downtown Charlotte. I stood before the board, 8 members people who'd known me for decades, and presented 2 new programs. The Elder Support Network. I said, we'll fund medical care and rehabilitation for stroke patients whose families have abandoned them. I know something about that. A few uncomfortable shifts in seats. Everyone knew what I was referencing. The program will cover physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and legal advocacy. No one should face recovery alone because their family chose greed over care. I clicked to the next slide. The second program is the Saskia Harrington Compassionate Care Scholarship. Saskia's head jerked up from where she sat in the back row. Her name, in 40-point font, on the screen. This scholarship will fund education and certification for caregivers. I continued. People like the nurse who asked if I could hear her when no one else thought to ask. People like the physical therapist who visited in secret. People who stay when families leave. It honors the person who stayed. I looked at Saskia. She looked back at me, eyes bright. I nodded. No speech needed. She understood. Not just honor, declaration. She was the heir to this legacy, not Malcolm. Her. The board voted unanimously. Both programs funded. Both operational starting January 1st. After the meeting, Saskia found me in the hallway. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I said, I did. She hugged me. First time since the gala. I felt the weight of 74 days lifting slightly. Not gone, but lighter. Thank you, Dad. We walked out together. Quincy waited in the lobby, 40 years old, architect, good man, patient enough to marry into this complicated family. He shook my hand. Nice work in there, he said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Email notification. From Davidson and Associates Legal to Leland Harrington. Subject final conversation. Client requests in-person meeting before sentencing. No lawyers, no recordings. Just you and him. Malcolm's attorney. Malcolm wanted to talk. One last time before the prison doors closed. I stood in the foundation lobby, Saskia beside me. The scholarship bearing her name now officially funded, the future rebuilding itself around us. And my son, the one who'd betrayed me, the one I still loved, the one facing years in prison, wanted to speak. Everything okay? Saskia asked, seeing my expression. Malcolm wants to meet, I said. Are you going to? I looked at the email. At the subject line. Final conversation. Yes, I said. I think I have to. I went. Not because I owed Malcolm anything, but because unanswered questions felt like letting him keep one last piece of control. The conference room smelled like industrial cleaner and regret. Malcolm looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. 42 years old, orange jumpsuit, shoulders hunched. Not the vice president who'd commanded boardrooms, just a man beginning to understand the price of catastrophic choices. We sat across a metal table. No glass, no guards. Just father and son. "Thank you for coming," he said. I nodded, said nothing. "Did you ever think about just talking to me?" Malcolm asked. "Before the gala, before everything. Did you ever consider pulling me aside and simply asking what was happening?" "Yes," I said. "September 9th. You stood beside my hospital bed while Dr. Mercer explained my recovery timeline. I heard everything, and I thought maybe if I made you understand, you'd stop." Malcolm's hands folded on the table, waiting. "But would you have listened?" I asked. "Would you have actually stopped?" Silence stretched between us. "No," he finally said. "Probably not. I was too deep in the debt. Too scared. Cecily had convinced me it was the only way. So I chose public exposure," I said. "Because private conversations don't stop crimes. They give criminals time to hide evidence. I don't expect forgiveness," Malcolm said quietly. "Good. Because I'm not ready to give it." He nodded. "Fair." We sat 5 more minutes in silence. Not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. He made choices. I stopped him. We both live with the consequences. 7 years embezzlement, elder abuse fraud. Cecily received 8. Vivian, 2, suspended for cooperation. 1 week after sentencing, a handwritten envelope arrived at my lakeside house. Malcolm's handwriting, the same careful loops from childhood birthday cards. I considered throwing it away unopened. I opened it. No apology, no plea, just a memory. "When I was 12, you taught me to build a birdhouse from scratch. You said, 'A foundation isn't what people see, but without it, everything collapses.' I thought about that a lot in here. How I built my life on shortcuts and appearances. How you built yours on what holds. I don't ask for anything. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what you were trying to teach me." I read it twice, set it back on the table, looked out at the lake. I didn't reply, but I didn't throw it away. When Saskia visited and saw the letter, she asked whether I'd write back. "Not today," I said, "but maybe someday, maybe. 7 years is a long time. People change, or they don't. But the possibility exists." "You're leaving the door open," she said. "Not cracked," I corrected. "Not open, cracked. He can prove himself or prove I was right to expose him. Either way, I'll know." "That's more than I thought you'd give him," she said quietly. "It's more than I thought I would too," I admitted. That evening, Graham called. 11-years-old voice carrying that familiar uncertainty. "Grandpa, can I come Saturday? I have a school project about family businesses. We interview someone who built something that lasted. I told my teacher I wanted to interview you." Malcolm's letter sat on the table. The lake stretched beyond the window. This simple house holding me in ways the mansion never did. "Not your dad?" I asked carefully. "No, you. You're the one who built it. And you're the one who's still here. The legacy passes to the next generation, not through blood alone, but through truth, through choices, through showing a boy that building something lasting means starting with a foundation that holds." "Saturday works," I said. "Bring a notebook." On January 14th, Graham arrived at the half-finished factory with a notebook and nervous energy. Steel beams stood exposed, concrete floors lay dusty, and the smell of fresh lumber cut through the cold winter air. I walked him through the floor plan, explaining where the assembly lines would go, where workers would one day take their breaks. He stopped near the main entrance. "Why build this?" he asked. "You already won. You have the money. You could retire." Why come back to manufacturing? I leaned against a concrete pillar. Because winning the lawsuit wasn't the point. Getting the money back wasn't even the point. Then what was? Proving that silence doesn't mean helplessness, I said. That having a stroke doesn't make you less of a person. That being knocked down doesn't mean you stay down, Graham wrote quickly. But you could prove that lots of ways. Why this specifically? I watched sunlight pour through empty window frames. Because this builds something that lasts. When I'm gone, there will be real jobs here. There will be people who got scholarships, who went to college, who built their own lives. That's not about me. That's about what comes after me. Legacy, he said softly. By agency, I corrected. I'm not building a monument. I'm building a choice for other people to have what almost got taken from me. The power to decide their own path. 6 days later, the hotel ballroom was warm and crowded and exactly right. Saskia had organized a ceremony for the foundation's first 3 scholarship recipients, Emily Richardson, Marcus Townsend, and Julia Hartwell, each receiving a full ride to a state university. I stood backstage without my cane balance steady. The physical therapy had worked. The determination had worked. The refusal to let my stroke define me had worked. Saskia walked to the podium. We often mistake silence for absence, she told the crowd. We forget that communication is more than words and strength is more than volume. She turned toward the wings. Please welcome Leland Ashford. The applause carried me forward. I gripped the podium and looked out at the room, at Graham in the crowd, at the 3 students watching from the front row with a kind of hope that was both terrifying and beautiful. And 2 years ago, I couldn't speak, couldn't walk right, couldn't hold a pen. The words came slowly but clearly. People looked at me and saw broken, saw finished, saw helpless. I paused. They were wrong. Applause rose, but I raised a hand gently. Not because I'm special, because I made a choice. Every day I chose to show up, do the work, and refuse the story other people wanted to write about me. I looked directly at the 3 students. Your job isn't to convince others. It's to convince yourself. That evening, I sat on my porch in the January cold breath, fogging in the quiet air. The foundation would continue. The factory would open in spring. Life would move forward. But I had finally understood something: agency isn't given. It's claimed. The hardest battle is never against other people. It's against the version of yourself that wants to give up. I sat in the silence I had chosen, and I was convinced. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Looking back, my biggest mistake wasn't trusting my family. It was staying silent for too long after I realized what they were doing. I thought I was powerless because I couldn't speak clearly after the stroke. But silence can be a choice, not just a limitation. Don't make my mistake. If you know something is wrong, find your voice, whatever form it takes. The lesson I want you to take from this family justice isn't about revenge. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the wrongdoers are people you love. These dads' revenge stories might sound dramatic, but they're really about reclaiming dignity and agency. I believe God allowed me to hear those hospital conversations for a reason, so I could fight back and build something meaningful. Real family justice leads to redemption, not retribution. That's what separates genuine dads' revenge stories from bitterness. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to fight for family justice? Your perspective might help someone else. Please consider sharing this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more dads' revenge stories about reclaiming power and dignity, subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. One final reminder, while this story is based on real emotions and real struggles, Some details have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. What matters is the truth at its core.